So how we doing? Y'all awake? How we doing? All right, just checking. Certainly glad to be here. Glad to see all of you here. And also, if you want to, for the folks who are not here, share with them. We're also live streaming this not only on your church Facebook page, but also my Roland Martin Unfiltered platform. We launched that September 2018. It was after when TV One canceled News One Now. A lot of people, they were coming up to me and they were saying, man, we should go back to CNN or MSNBC. Fox is absolutely scared to call me, trust me. They book, everybody who comes on my show, they won't book me. And there's a reason for it, because they know I'm gonna say exactly what they are, which is evil. And so we launched the digital platform, and it was interesting because so many black folks, and I'm gonna talk about this in my presentation. Some of the people were talking about going on those platforms, but I had to remind them, I said, yeah, but we don't control those platforms. They determine the subjects, who the guests are, and so we're simply participants. And the only way you control the narrative, you actually own the product. And so when we launched this platform, people told me I was crazy. They said, why would you do this? Well, a year later, we did, after 100 million views, 345 million minutes watched. We grew our YouTube channel by 280,000 subscribers. And then people said, oh, I see. And then in the same time, NBC launched their digital streaming service, ABC expanded theirs, CBS expanded theirs, and a number of other companies did as well. I said, well, if they figured it out, now y'all understand what I was talking about. And the reason that is important is because I run 3 black newspapers. I understand what it means when you control the narrative. And unfortunately, too many of us are dependent upon asking white folks asking them to cover us, to tell our story, and then we wonder why it gets told wrong. Which also means that we must take it upon ourselves to support what is ours. And so we can't keep saying, well, we need this and we need that, and then we don't actually support it. And so that's why it matters. It matters that we must do that because, trust me, when black folks, when we watch MSNBC more than any other network in prime time. So there's a reason they made $760 million. There's a reason why CNN made more than $780 million. Fox made $1.32 billion. And so we actually watch TV more than anybody else. Look at the Nielsen Consumer Report on African Americans. We consume more than 50 hours of television a week. That's more than actually a full-time job. And that's why when you see black content on Lifetime and WeTV, that's because of that. When Oprah launched her network, didn't have many black shows. It's real black now. That's why you have that. But also, I think too many of us are living in the clouds because you have 8 networks that target African Americans. TV One, Clio TV, BET, Her, Aspire, Bounce, Own, and Revolt. That do 1,344 hours of content a week, yet not 1 hour a week is dedicated to news. And so black folks, we are being inundated every single day with nothing but entertainment and reality shows, as well as crime shows, old sitcoms, award shows, and then black folks walking around looking like zombies, wondering why we're not aware of what's going on in this country. Here you have that fool lying tonight at the State of the Union, and then you're not going to have any black breakdown on any black network of what he was talking about. And if you are a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, the largest group of elected officials in the House, Democrats, in order for them to explain their perspective, they're going to have to go on a white network to do it because no black network has the guts to actually have a show. And that, folks, is a death knell for our people. And so I'm going to use some of that to set up what I want to talk about. Pastor, I appreciate the invitation. Glad to see my longtime friend, Pastor Jeffrey Johnson. He spent many years in Dallas with the Bishop 5 Revival. I was a longtime member of Friendship West Baptist Church, Reverend Frederick Douglass Haynes. And so I saw him last night in D.C. at the Congressional Black Caucus's National African American Leadership Summit. And so certainly glad to be here. So let's get started. Let's get right into it. And I want to speak from the perspective of it is time for a radical reprogramming of our people. It's time for a radical reprogramming of our people. if you listen to what Pastor laid out in that presentation, the short version is the person who controls the medium controls the minds. The person that controls the medium controls the minds. When you hear about countries all across the world, when there's a coup anywhere in the world, the first thing they get in control of when there's a coup is the military. You got to have the guns. The second thing they always take over is media. Not the banks, not the ports, it's media. Because they understand that when you control media, then you're able to dictate to people what it is they hear and see, and then how they respond. So what happens is they used to take control of the television stations, the radio stations, the newspapers. Now the first thing they do in any place in the world is they shut down the internet, because you don't want it to have this unfiltered platform. In China, they control the internet. Google goes into China. All these companies go into China, and they say, you have to put these provisions in place to censor the content, because we don't want our citizens to be aware of certain things, because in China, that is a communist system, so therefore they still want to control the minds of the people, so you limit the information that they're able to receive. And when you limit the information people are able to receive, then you can move them any way you want to. How did Hitler gain a foothold in Germany? His mastery of media and controlling media and the propaganda they were pushing out in terms of media. Why is Donald Trump able to lie? Why do you have white conservative evangelicals who treat him like he's the son of Jesus? Because Fox News and conservative talk radio every single day is pushing out this constant narrative of how he's great and wonderful. Why were they so appealed to him? Because for 8 years, when you had a black president, all they said was, America's weak. He's weak. He bowed down. He doesn't respect America. He's not a Christian. He's a Muslim. They said all kinds of stuff about his wife as well. And so there's no wonder white folks reacted the way they did in 2016 when Trump ran, because for 8 years, all they heard every single day was how awful America is under Obama, how bad the nation is under Obama, how terrible it is. And then all of a sudden, here comes John Wayne to the rescue to so-called make America great again. And they ignored all the women he sexually assaulted. They ignored the 3 wives. They ignored all the baby mamas he got. They ignored all those things, and they said, that's our savior. Because conservative media framed it that way. That's the power of media. Dr. King and his folks in the Black Freedom Movement understood that, because they realized that how you shape the narrative then determines how people respond. White folks in America didn't care about the civil rights movement until they saw the water hoses in Birmingham. LBJ could not get Congress to move on the 1964 Voting Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act. But it wasn't until white folks saw black children being attacked by dogs and water hoses, then they said, we've got to do something. They got to get the right to vote. What I'm trying to set up here is that media shapes the narrative and determines what we see. That's why it's important, why you got to have black folks not only owning but also in mainstream. Go back to the Kerner Commission report, 1968. That report was designed to study why the riots take place all across America. Do understand that all of those events that took place in the 1960s, there's nothing even before then, there's nothing in the history of America that black people have gotten that did not come as a result of black blood. Black folks had to die every time. Anything that happened that we got happened because somebody black died as a result. So they studied the riot and they disagreed on all kind of stuff, but they did come to one consensus. They did say that there was no diversity in media. So the Kerner Commission report said there are two Americas, one white, one black. And then they called for the broadening or the opening of doors in media. And so the reason you saw the first waves of African Americans in mainstream media took place after the Kerner Commission report in 1968. And so I'm laying all of that out so you can understand that when you talk about how did we reach this point, that the Bible can be set in the motherland, and you go to black churches today and it looks like a Trump rally. I have been in black churches and I've seen stained glass windows all around, and I swear I'm looking at a Trump cabinet meeting of nothing but white people. I've gone to places and they've taken this view of from the Sistine Chapel. This is what Jesus looks like, and blonde hair and blue eyes, and folks have run with that. And Jesus did not look like Brad Pitt. In fact, if you took the movie 12 Years a Slave, Chiwetel Ejiofor and Brad Pitt, Jesus looked more like Chiwetel Ejiofor than Brad Pitt. But the person who is in control of the narrative sets the tone. And what we have done is we have fallen victim to his story and not history. And so we are continuing to to allow white supremacy to define how it is we see not only the Bible, but how we even see ourselves. We are walking around today still operating with a white supremacy mindset, even when it comes to black people. When I had my show, a brother told me, he said, man, when are you going to get you a show? I was like, I'm on TV every day. 7 to 9 on TV 1 for 4 years. He said, no. I mean a real show. I said, a real show? I said, do you realize that when this is when Brian Williams, before he was exaggerating stories and he got demoted, that's just fact. I said, do you realize that when Brian Williams comes to Washington, D.C. to do the NBC Nightly News, that Brian Williams sits in the exact same chair that I sit in? I said, do you know that there's a glass table just to the left on the second shelf? It's a mirror and a bristle brush. I said, Brian can't use a bristle brush. I said, brother, do you realize that the cameras in the background and the walls are the exact same? I said, because see, what you don't realize is that we contract the studio out with NBC News Channel. You don't realize that we send the signal from the fiber optic line from Washington, D.C. to our satellite location in Denver, which then goes up to the satellite uplink, which broadcasts around the country. I said, so I use the same studio, sit in the same chair, send the signal the exact same way as they do, but you don't think my show is real because it's on a black network. You think I would have a real show if it's on CNN or MSNBC. I said, you are promoting white supremacy. We walk around promoting white supremacy when we say, well, you know, it's a black business. When white folks have been late showing up, you can't show me a cable company that's arrived at your house on time to install your cable. But if a black-owned business is 30 or 45 minutes late, you will not call another black business ever again because you will say, you know how we are. I have worked with some awful white folks, and I don't sit there and go, well, you know, it's a white business. We literally, because of how we have been conditioned to think that what is black is second rate. It is less than. It is not as good. We walk around saying those things and we think it's joking. We say, oh man, this is CP time. Well, I've been to a whole bunch of stuff that white folks been real late. I ain't never heard somebody say it's WP time. And some of us might say, well, that's just an innocent thing, but no, it's not, because what you don't understand is you are actually furthering white supremacy by telling another generation that we are less than. So therefore, our children are growing up believing that we are somehow secondary and not as good. And so you take the same thing as a white Jesus and put it next to how we view ourselves. And so therefore, we're simply promoting another generation, another generation, another generation of the power of white supremacy. See, the power of white supremacy is not just that white people think that they are better and more advanced than us. White supremacy also means that it has degraded us to the point that when we see ourselves, we look at one another and hate what we're looking at. Annually across the globe, $10 billion is spent every year on bleaching cream. $10 billion. A study was done that 77% of the people in Nigeria have used some form of bleaching product. Huge, it's huge in India and in Asian countries, but you're now seeing it across many African countries. Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and South Africa have actually limited the selling of bleaching products. They've been regulating it because one of the ingredients is known to cause cancer, but they also are doing that because they don't want their people to somehow believe that white is right or being lighter is brighter and better. That, folks, is also a byproduct of white supremacy. The reason that we are dealing with this whole issue in terms of how the Bible is viewed today is because it was designed that there's no way in the world we're going to somehow give people of color, give black people credit for any of this. So therefore, we must redefine the Bible and redefine the images. And so when you see the angels, they're white. When you see Jesus and his disciples, they're white. You see that. But if you actually go back even today to exactly where the Bible was set, you walk around saying, I don't see that many white people. What does that tell you? It tells you that that was by design, that they did not want that to be the message, because, again, that would be unsettling to white people to have to acknowledge that Jesus had feet like bronze and his hair was woolly. And you see somebody white with woolly hair, you know is something black up in that lineage. See, we just have to be honest in terms of exactly what is going on here. And so it's no shock. And so then what happens is we then, by us promoting that, what we're doing is doing the work that they had already put in place, as opposed to saying, no, we've got to now redefine or reprogram ourselves. So why am I using the phrase that we have to reprogram ourselves? 2 years ago, when they had the MLK 50, commemorating the 50th anniversary assassination of Dr. King, I was interviewing a number of civil rights luminaries across the country. Interviewed Juanita Abernathy, the widow of Ralph Abernathy, and Reverend C.T. Vivian, Zernona Clayton, Clarence Jones, Dr. King's attorney. Was interviewing, of course, Dorothy Cotton. Dorothy Cotton was the only woman who was in Dr. King's inner circle, and she was over the citizenship education program for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And I was reading her book, and I read a book after she had passed away. I interviewed her in February of 2018. One of her last words is, I'll see you in April in Memphis. She was too ill to make it. She passed away in that June. So I had the last sit-down interview with her. But if you read her book, she has a passage in there that totally blew me away. And she said that if you wanted to join SCLC, you could not just show up and say, hey, when is the next meeting? What you would do is you would actually have to go through the program that she set up, where what they would do is they would bring you in, and then they would test you to determine whether or not you needed to be reprogrammed. Dr. King, the program was set up, you could not join SCLC until they had determined what was your state of mind. And so if you did not meet a certain criteria, then you had to go through their program to be reprogrammed before you could go and participate in anything with SCLC. And I read that and it blew me away because for years I've been talking about this absolute need for Black America to be reprogrammed. I spent more years in Black media than mainstream media. Why? Because I did not have the belief that Black media was less than mainstream. I believe that we could have the exact same or even better products than what you see in mainstream media. Even if you didn't have the same level of resources, we can still have A-level talent working in Black media. See, what happened was, that was this view that, well, we only could work in Black media because we could not go work over here. So you got to understand the language. What is it? Perfect example. That was the Negro Leagues, and then that was Major League. Think about that. Negro Leagues, Major Leagues. What that phrase alone said is that any other league was minor. Yet, when Dizzy Dean and other white baseball players would play the Negro Leagues in the off season, they routinely got their butts kicked because the reality is you had more talent in the Negro Leagues than you had in the Major Leagues. That's why after Jackie Robinson came into the Major Leagues, every year another Black player came in who was the Rookie of the Year. Another brother, another brother, another brother. That was called talent. So therefore, it wasn't really Major Leagues and Negro Leagues. The only thing that made them major is they had better stadiums, better travel, and better uniform because they were white and they had more money. But they were not the Major Leagues. The Negro Leagues actually was the major talent. They simply didn't have the same resources. But by saying you're the major, you are also over here, you're the minors. And so the same thing happens when we walk around believing that white ice is colder. See, let me be real clear with y'all, okay? If you needed somebody to come here to make you feel good, y'all should have called somebody else. God gave me a spirit of discomfort. I make folk uncomfortable on television. I make people uncomfortable on radio. And y'all see my show. I don't let up against folks. If you lie, I'm going to nail your behind to the wall. That's just how I do. But somebody has to say what is happening, because what's going on is we literally are promoting white supremacy even when we're operating in Black spaces. If you honest, you know doggone well you were raised. You better get a perm in your hair. You don't have that nappy hair. That means generations of African Americans, especially Black women, were told you ain't good enough. Your hair is nappy. That's awful. You need to perm that thing. Why? Because you had what was the white standard of beauty. You just had in California, they finally passed the Crown Act that outlawed discrimination against hair, but other states haven't done it. You got two brothers in Texas at a high school they suspended because by saying, well, your hair is too long, even though the rules said it can't touch the ear, it can't touch the shoulder. So they put it up. They said, no, still not good enough. We are walking around literally promoting anti-Blackness because we have been trained and conditioned that the only way we are going to be able to get ahead is if we change our look, change our attire, change what we say, change how we say it. If you're a brother, you can't work in corporate America with too much bass. You got to have more treble than bass because white folks can't handle bass. They deal with treble. They got treble in their music, and they can't handle bass in our voices or in our music. So the white standard is the one that we've had to abide by and live by in order just to get ahead. Black parents totally, look, you're You go in front of some white folks, you got to change your look. You can't have too many colors. You got to be blue. It got to be gray. It got to be, it can't be, you can't go in there with no yellows. If it's red, it got to be a low key red. Can't be a bright red. We have had to contort ourselves in such a way to make white people comfortable in America. And I dare say in 2020, it's time for white folks to be uncomfortable. It's time for us not to fall for the same traps. And look, this ain't just us. I was in Ghana for 10 days in December. And so we pull up to the hotel. We get there. It's at night. We pull up. And y'all, I ain't even out the car and I'm about to cuss. Y'all in front. Because y'all sitting in church. Don't act like y'all don't cuss. Some of y'all going to be cussing the parking lot attendant. So don't be trying to act like you don't cuss. We pull up to the hotel in Ghana, and I look through the double doors, and I'm like, who the hell got a white Santa Claus? It was a mannequin. And I walked in, I said, hey. And they probably look at me I walked in, hey. What the hell up with the white Santa Claus in Africa? I said, now y'all got to take that down while we here. Think about that. We are in Ghana. And I'm seeing a chubby, cheap, red-faced white man in a Santa suit. I don't mean no disrespect. I don't care. Look, y'all, I don't care. Santa ain't real, okay? Fictional characters don't have to stay the color white folks decided. They don't. It's fictional. Make believe, which means make it black. And y'all know we go to the mall. Yo, they got a black Santa, like we shocked. He should be black. But again, when you start unpacking this, if you really start just sitting down and seeing how so much of our state of mind is all around making whiteness great and making what's black lesser than, then we have a better understanding of how we're in the position that we're in now. It's a better understanding of how we are driven in this economy. It explains our politics. It explains what's happening in the church. It explains all of that. Because see, the reality is, by continuing to promote that, and see, you also got to remember, see, we talk about separation of church and state, but you got to remember, the church also used to be government. That was public policy, born out of what eventually became the Church of St. Peter, which became the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, the Vatican, is its own country. The Vatican had an empire that spread across the world, which is why today, when you go to what's the largest growth of Catholicism in the world? In Africa. That didn't happen just by design. I'm saying that is because we have to reprogram our minds to now begin to say, I have to be the last generation. You should be saying to yourself, this will be the last generation in my family where we are going to continue to further white supremacy. You must make a decision now whether or not you are going to allow that to continue for another generation and another generation, or whether or not you are going to say, we are now going to reprogram our children and our nieces and our nephews and begin to present them with a whole different world. We love to verbalize, our history doesn't just go back to slavery. We were once king and queens. Well, don't run around saying we were once king and queens if you ain't picked up a book to actually find out what kings and queens we were. Don't just simply say that, and we've not done the research to be able to tell our kids that. See, it was interesting, all these people, the haters out there who were saying, oh, the year of return is nothing but a marketing gimmick by Ghana, just trying to get a whole bunch of travel money. Well, I'm trying to understand. Black folks go to Thailand, black folks go to Paris, and they see the Eiffel Tower. So you try and tell me that it's okay for us to spend money to go see the Eiffel Tower or to go to Venice and those places, but somehow we can't go see the Ashanti Kingdom that's in Ghana. We somehow can't go to Senegal, can't go to Cote d'Ivoire or Nigeria or Kenya or South Africa. See, again, that's also black self-hate. When we look, black folks lost their mind when Meghan Markle married Harry. I said, but if a black king got married, would nobody be trying to stay up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch them? I ain't care about Harry or Meghan. I ain't care about the other ones got married. I don't know what the hell, Kate, William. I don't care about none of them. Not now, one of them. But black folks were losing their mind. Meghan married a prince. Okay, I'm going to go see Prince Hakeem get married and Coming to America too. I'm good. And everybody going to be black in that movie. No, but I want you to think about that. I want you to think how black people reacted because he picked one of us as his wife. And I'm going, okay. People were just losing their mind. Now, I don't care if he could have picked anybody he wanted to. Yes, she's half black, half white. Gotcha, okay. And thank goodness the black side of her family is sane because the white side crazy. Lord have mercy. I can guarantee you if she had a black daddy and like her white daddy, they wouldn't be paying him to give interviews. I'm just saying. What I'm trying to get us to understand is that we have to literally stop ourselves in our tracks and begin to understand that we have to reframe how we look at ourselves. And if we begin to do that within the confines of our homes, and then take it to our neighbors, and then extend it to our streets, and then our neighborhoods and our blocks, our churches, our organizations, then we are going to truly begin to understand our power. We'll begin to understand that how can we be living in a world that is 2/3 people of color, yet we degrade ourselves to think that we somehow are the minority in a world where we are the majority? How is it that we somehow believe that we have more in common with somebody who is a rural voter in Iowa where they can't count, but a brother or a sister who is in Lagos, Nigeria? We have extended our level of hate to people who literally look just like us. And when I interviewed the president of Ghana while I was there, he said it makes no sense that the world's largest continent, also with the most resources and riches, is also a place of the poorest people. Why? Because white supremacy and colonialism is the reason for that. Gerald Horne is a phenomenal historian at the University of Houston, and there are a series of books that Gerald Horne has, and you should get these books. One of them is called The Apocalypse of Settler Colonialism, The Roots of Slavery, White Supremacy, and Capitalism in 17th Century North America and the Caribbean. He also has White Supremacy Confronted, U.S. Imperialism and Anti-Communism versus the Liberation of Southern Africa from Rhodes to Mandela. Another book he has called Race War, White Supremacy and the Japanese Attack on the British Empire. A book that you definitely must read is called The Counter-Revolution of 1776, Slave Resistance and the Origins of the United States of America. See, Gerald argues in this book that the American Revolution was not about dumping some tea in the Boston Harbor. What he argues is that the 13 colonies had no other economy but slavery. It drove the southern part of the country, and then the northern colonies, they were the ones who actually had the insurance companies that insured the cargo known as enslaved Africans. And so therefore, the economy of the 13 colonies was solely built on the backs of enslaved Africans. He says the 13 colonies had fear that England was going to eventually outlaw slavery, which will have decimated their economy. So he lays out in his book that was one of the reasons why the 13 colonies also wanted to secede, because they wanted the freedom to be able to continue slavery. Yet we walk around on July 4th talking about tea and freedom, when in fact, if you study the history, the British created territories saying to enslaved Africans, if you get to this part, which is now Florida, you will now be in free territory. It wasn't just folks who were going to Canada. There were parts of Florida they were racing to that were deemed free territory. But because we have been inundated with his story, we are literally walking around with the exact same thing we're doing with the Bible, retelling his story and not actually talking about history. You can go to Tennessee and they talk about, oh, let's go see Jack Daniels. No, let's go see the black man who actually showed Jack Daniels how to make whiskey, but never got the credit for actually making the whiskey. Let's actually go see who that is. We talk about, of course, well, who created the telephone? Well, let's talk about the brother who was also working with them. We can walk down in American history. I was just reading just today of the sister who designed the actual portrait of FDR that's on the dime, but it was giving credit to somebody else who was white. We can go on and on and on with that. We have loads and loads of history where we were not giving proper credit for the work we've done. I mean, it's only because of the movie Hidden Colors that we know about the brilliance of those black mathematicians, those sisters who were with NASA. But if it wasn't for those stories, we would not even know they existed. That is because it is by design for us to be walking around in a state of ignorance as opposed to in a state of supreme knowledge. And if we are walking around with history, with his story in our brains, all we're doing is passing down the exact same thing like DNA to our children and to their children and their children. I say this generation has to say, no, this ends today. This ends now. And when we do that, when we also begin to do it within our church houses, that's when it then begins to grow and spread to other parts. None of us can be afraid or can be scared of blackness. We can't somehow run from blackness. We can't, it's so many people who, if you say I'm unapologetically black, they're like, oh, why you got to say that? I ran the Chicago Defender and I changed our masthead. Honest, balanced, truthful, unapologetically black. We were owned by a group of black millionaires in Detroit. They literally said, well, I don't know about that slogan because what's going to happen when we go talk to white advertisers? I said, fool, we are a black newspaper. I think they already know we're black. But here were black millionaires who did not need white approval for anything, who was scared of unapologetically black. And we've got black Christians who are scared to actually put a real image of Jesus that conforms with the very Bible they are teaching in their churches, as if somehow they got to get approval. And I'm like, wait a minute, if your whole church is black and you being fed on your tithes and offerings from black people, who are you afraid of? It It is because somehow they say, I'm going to be in the minority and I don't want folks looking at me crazy. No, what you should be saying, y'all crazy. You're crazy for continuing to present a wrong and distorted and unbiblical view of the word by virtue of who you are showing. And then all of a sudden, when you begin to reframe and redefine and reprogram folks in the church, then they are empowered to leave the church and then do the exact same thing in other facets of their lives. And then that's when all of a sudden we're not afraid of black art. We're not afraid of black businesses. We're not afraid of what's black because we have affirmed blackness. We begin to say that no, black is actually beautiful. It's not just Stokely Carmichael who said it, Kwame Ture. Dr. King talked about that. It wasn't just Malcolm X who was talking about all the definitions of anything that's black is bad. That's why people say Colin Kaepernick got blackballed. I said, no, ain't a black owner. He got whiteballed. And people say, well, why do you keep using whiteball? Because they white. And keeping him from playing ball. Some of y'all gonna get there at least halfway home. The very phrases we use, the words we use, dictates how we begin to see each other. And that's why when Bible talks about the power of the tongue. What we are saying to one another dictates how we then see and feel about one another. We're living in a time where the features of black women, which this country and the world for generations hated, despised, degraded, trashed. Now all of a sudden, everybody trying to get big butts, big lips, exotic features, braids. I can go down the line. You got folks in mass media who all of a sudden now, oh my God, y'all understand, you can't mention no Kardashian on any of my shows. Because I know the game. I met Kim Kardashian. She very white. Until she gets spray tanned. I'm sorry. Did I upset some people? Demi Lovato. Oh, I had a great Star Spangled Banner. That ain't her color. Why am I saying that? Because now all of a sudden, bronze is a good look. Now you have folks who are making millions appropriating what they used to say was awful. And the people who are appropriating that and now making the millions and billions don't look like us. So isn't it interesting? When I was watching the documentary on Sam Cooke on Netflix, you realize that it was a white manager who stole his publishing. Then I sat there and I said, well, I wonder if we're also the ones who are now making the documentaries on our own people. I said, so here we had our music stolen, and now we can't even make the same money on doing stuff on our own people. See, this thing extends, this thing goes much deeper and much broader. And so when Pastor laid out how leaders took the images of the Bible and redefined it through the prism of whiteness, that now extends to every part of our society. And we then are promoting that as somehow as being good, and then we look at inequality of wealth. We look at the average black family with $5,000 in wealth, and the average white family with $110,000, and then begin to understand how white supremacy created all this entire system at this, not just this country, but this world is based on. And then when I hear black people talk about what's happening with African nations, I try to get them to understand that Ghana was the first African nation that got liberation in 1957. Then we talk about the Congo, and when you had Patrice Lumumba, who was killed with the assistance of the CIA. When you talk about South Africa, when the CIA helped capture Nelson Mandela. When you look at these African nations, they really have only been dealing with freedom for about 50 or so years. And you're dealing with African nations that actually were created, but they were built upon white supremacy and colonialism. So they were not created ground up in terms of creating their own institutions, things along those lines. No, they were created on top of what was already established by white supremacy. So two things are happening. They're trying to create a new culture and a new way of life on top of what was already created. And we're in the same way, which is why that's why the church matters. Because if there are institutions that we control, Dr. King laid this out in his book, Chaos or Community, where do we go from here? He said there are 4 institutions that are proudly positioned to save black America. He said the black church, the black press, fraternities and sororities, and professional organizations. So the power of the black church is that this is the one institution where collectively more of us gather on an annual, weekly basis than anywhere else. There is no NAACP meeting. There is no Alpha, aka Delta, Zeta, Kappa, Omega meeting. There's no links. There's no top ladies of distinction, 100 black men that gathers a number of black people in one place, in black places built by black people on a weekly basis. Which means that when the black church truly takes its rightful place and then begins to reprogram its membership, what you will then see is a reprogramming of its members who then will go out into the world and do exactly what Jesus said, to go out and make disciples. You will also then be able to go out and then make new black disciples when it comes to appreciating blackness and then redefining what it means to be black. And then when you do that, and then it trickles in from the pews in the church down to the children's church, and then down to the nursery. Then all of a sudden, black children who then come out of the womb and then go into the nursery, and then go from that to kids' church, and then come into the pews here. That means they will have 18 consecutive years of affirming blackness, of understanding what it means and the power of that. So then that means that when they are now 19 and 20, they're not walking out in the world confused about who they are and allowing somebody else to dictate them. So then when they are presented with some nonsense in classrooms, they've already been fortified in that space, led by the black church, to say, no, that's simply not right. See, what really should be happening in our schools is not we have black kids who are being kicked out of class because they say they can't sit still. We should have some black kids being kicked out by saying, no, I can't let you teach me what's not right because you teaching me his story as opposed to history. But see, no black kid can say that unless those black kids are being properly armed with information. See, y'all better thank the Lord I don't have biological children, because I'm telling you right now, my kids will be giving teachers hell every single day for the nonsense that's being taught in classrooms. And I'm raising my nieces. Trust me right now, I walked them into my library, 1,000+ books. Read that, and that. So when you bring some nonsense home they gave you, no, we're going to send some hell back their way, and they're going to learn something new. Why am I saying that? Because the only way you can redefine and reprogram a people is when you begin to accept in your own mind, as Dr. King said, you got to write your own Emancipation Proclamation. You got to free your own mind, and you can't have a free mind if it's bought and controlled by somebody else. See, when I was at CNN, y'all don't understand. 2009, I sat down with John Klein, who was the president of CNN US, and he said to me, when you going to stop doing Tom Joyner and TV One and all the rest of this stuff? I said, when you going to give me a 5-day-a-week show? Why am I going to give up my stuff in order on the promise of the hope of possibly getting a show? 2000, John was a great guy, 2000, but see, they wanted all of me. No, you can't get all of me if you ain't giving me all of you. And so in 2010, John Klein got fired from CNN. Well, guess what? When I left CNN in 2013, I still had TV One, still had Tom Joyner Morning Show, still had my books, still had my speeches, still had my own company. Because, see, I never bought into the notion that CNN was better than TV One. That's why on the night Obama was elected in 2008, I told them I'm going to have to take 3 breaks from being on the air because I've got to go do TV One. They said to me, and I never forget, they said, wait a minute, don't you know that you're going to be on CNN in 200 countries? I said, I understand that, but let me be real clear with y'all. TV One paid me before y'all paid me. And so I don't believe that they are less than on the night a black man's going to get elected president, so I'm going to step away and do them while I'm doing you. Why am I saying that? Because, see, I never looked at black media as being secondary to CNN or MSNBC on the rest of them. That's why when I step to the table, I'm bringing blackness with me, because guess what? I'm only going to be here for a time. As I say, I'm likely to get fired anyway, so I might as well say what I got to say while I'm there. How does that thing work? When I was asked to interview Winnie Mandela when she spoke at a church in Birmingham, they asked me to go down there, and I did. Interviewed her for 15 minutes. They came back and they said, well, why didn't you ask Winnie this and ask her this? I said, why in the hell y'all didn't go interview Winnie Mandela? See, look, I was a quote. I said, if y'all want to ask those questions, y'all should have went interview Winnie Mandela. I interviewed Winnie, asked Winnie what I wanted to ask Winnie, and that's what we got. They told me, well, we not going to run it. Fine. I went to John Klein and said, hey, they ain't going to run my interview. Give me the interview so I going to run it on my TV One show. When she died in 2018, I restreamed that interview. Had I not had a black platform to show the interview that I did with Winnie Mandela would be still sitting on a shelf in Atlanta at CNN, and nobody would have ever seen it for the rest of history. Why? What am I trying to lay out to you? If you do not have a black space to be able to have black freedom and black creativity to affirm blackness, then all you're simply doing is riding on somebody else's watch, somebody else's coattails, asking them for permission to do what is required. This generation of black folks must be willing and have the tenacity and have the audacity to be willing to challenge white supremacy in 2020, to be willing to use black spaces to affirm blackness and not ask somebody else for permission. This church and other churches in Indianapolis, in this state, in this country, don't have to ask Robert Jeffress or Franklin Graham or Paula White or any of those clueless white conservative evangelicals that it's time to redefine blackness. We can do it right now if we have the guts and the willingness to do it, and if we're not afraid to tick some folks off, even if they are black. Harriet Tubman couldn't save everybody, but I dare say it's time for this generation to save the next generation for black people, because the next generation should never have to deal with the same thing we're dealing with, and it starts right here with the black church.